And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be normal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, with planet.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside ST-UTC. Bring in ST-UTC. Off. It's orange!
45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
If there's methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. Keep that. Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good evening. You are taking a live look right now at Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where SpaceX is ready to launch the SpainSat NG I mission, a brand new satellite for the country of Spain. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I will be your host for today's launch webcast, and I see everyone in chat able to hear me, thank goodness. Now, I know the big question here, of course, is going to be, well, who's joining me? If this is a SpainSat, if only we had somebody from Spain who could comment on it. Do we have you, Alejandro?
Yeah, you do have me. It's 1:36 a.m. here in Spain, but definitely, a nice time to launch a satellite into space, I guess.
I mean, anytime's a good time to launch a satellite into space, but of course, we will be going to you for a lot more info on this satellite, because this is actually a really cool communication satellite, a whole bunch of different bands on it. We'll get into the details. But joining us from the field is Julia. How's it going, Julia?
Why, hello there, Sawyer. It is going well. For me, this is just a continuation of a full day of space, and now I'm ready to end it with a launch, and it is a beautiful night for it.
Absolutely gorgeous, and the official weather forecast agrees. Currently a 95% chance of go weather-wise. Now, go what? Go SpainSat. Thank you also Kevin Michael Reed, who's going to be pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, and we will of course get awesome views from D-Wise and Max Evans in the field. But Alex, do you mind talking us a little bit through what this satellite is, SpainSat NG I?
Yeah, so this is sort of our next generation or new generation of military communications satellites for the Spanish government. So essentially, there's been a series of previous satellites that have been launched for the Spanish military communications satellites and everything. Although it's also going to be part of, like NATO and things like that, NATO countries as well. But today's satellite, that SpainSat New Generation 1 satellite, is special because it introduces a lot of new technology, right? Replacing all of the aging technology of some of the older satellites. Like, for example, the original SpainSat, which was launched in 2006. Imagine how things have changed, right, in 19 years since then. And so they've been able to introduce a lot more newer technology. And one of the things that it's very interesting, of course, for the military is things like anti-jamming and things like that, where you are essentially protecting the satellite against a potential threat. And so that is very important for, any government, of course, wants their own independent communication system for the military, for the government. And so this is sort of an effort to be able to have that. In fact, for this satellite in particular, a good majority, not the entirety of the satellite, but a good majority of it has been manufactured and produced and designed in Spain instead of, having to go to another country or even to the US or something like that to get that kind of technology, which is, again, coming back to the whole thing of trying to get this independently instead of having to rely on other countries, which if we're talking about a government satellite, you kind of want to have that sort of capability, that independence out of that. So that's the type of satellite launching today. That's SpainSat New Generation 1 satellite. It's part of a 2-satellite system that is going to be launched, and it's aiming to essentially have a view of 2/3 of the globe. If you can imagine, if you have one, you can see almost the entirety of like half of the Earth, right? And so you have another one also in geostationary orbit a few degrees away, and so then you can cover at least 2/3 of the globe with those 2 satellites, which again, it can also help with other allies like the US and other countries in Europe. And so it's just another one of these that augments all of those capabilities, at least of of Spain's communications in space. And another thing that I should say as well is this satellite is huge. This is like a bit not very normal, I guess, for our industry to develop this kind of huge satellite. It's about 6 metric tons in mass, which is why that rocket doesn't have any landing legs or grid fins. But I bet we're going to talk about that later.
Oh, we are absolutely going to get into that, yeah. And I mean, the satellite that you're talking about, it is really cool being able to cover Europe, North America, South America, Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia, all the way up to Singapore. So that is a wide swath of coverage, and up there to replace some aging satellites that I think we'll talk more about as we go on.
That second satellite that I just mentioned, that's also going to launch on Falcon 9. We're maybe talking about, is that also going to happen on the other launch? But yeah.
Yeah, will they expend the other? Oh, expendable. Wait a minute, Julia, which booster is this? And we're saying goodbye?
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, we are saying goodbye to a booster, and that is something we rarely do anymore with Falcon 9s. This is booster 1073, and it will be taking its 21st flight. That trip down memory lane begins, believe it or not, with a Starlink 415. It flew 13 Starlink missions. It's also flown SES-22, Hokuto-R, Amazonas Nexus, CRS-27, Bandwagon 1, GSAT-20, and Thuraya 4. So it's been a good ride. And tonight we get to say goodbye to another booster.
I mean, at least the other cool thing about this booster is just how international it is in terms of what it's covered. Obviously, Hokuto-R was Japan. You had Amazonas Nexus, which was Hisdesat, so I believe that was also a Spain company. You had the Thuraya, another with the next-gen ones. So quite the international booster. And so there's no drone ship downrange, but Julia, is there a fairing recovery ship?
Well, one part of, or shall we say 2 parts of this mission will be recovered, and that is each of the fairing halves. And those will be recovered by Bob tonight, and Bob is due east. And this is a very energetic mission, so I'm guessing Bob is actually pretty far downrange tonight.
It definitely is. And in terms of the direction, Alex, that this mission is going, what direction are we going here, and what orbit are we going into?
Yeah, so this is actually a very easy one. Whenever you hear about this big satellite kind of going into a geostationary orbit, that means it's going straight east. That's the lowest inclination it can reach. And so the second stage for this mission will do a 2-burn profile. The first burn, as you can see there, will put it heading towards the east. The booster will be expended. Second stage will burn once to get into a parking orbit around the Earth. Then, about 25 minutes later, it's going to get over the equator near Africa, and there it's going to burn again that MVAC engine for about a minute again and push this satellite into a geostationary transfer orbit. So it's going to be that oval shape kind of trajectory that will put it, with the apogee close to geostationary orbit and the perigee near low Earth orbit. But that's pretty much what we expect for the second stage. The parameters, of course, are not known for the oval shape itself, like that orbit. Unfortunately, we never know what's a target beforehand, and it's something that, sometimes it's up to the performance of the rocket. Sometimes they try to squeeze a bit more performance by, I don't know, like removing some of the inclination, increasing the height of the highest point of the orbit, and things like that. But that's something that we'll have to learn after the fact.
Exactly. And for reference, once it gets into its geostationary orbit, which is the end goal where it stays stationary over one spot, this will end up at the 30 degrees east location. The second satellite will be at the 29 degrees east location. And you can see there the stats on the screen for SpaceX with the 14th launch of the year, which means also the 14th of the month. And then the 429th orbital Falcon 9 mission, 102nd from Launch Complex 39A. Always some really cool info there. As we hit 48 minutes to go, here's an interesting question from 9/8 Central. And Julia, I'm going to put this one to you because I think you may have actually seen this satellite arrive. 9/8 Central is wondering, does SpaceX have its own transport system to receive payloads for other countries? Is there a shipping company? How do they get the payload to the Cape?
Oh, well, I don't know if I saw this one specifically arrive. But I mean, there's multiple ways to get a satellite to our spaceport, and one of them is something along the lines of an Antonov or a C-17. So you can go by air, or you can go by ship. And we've had a few ships come into our port to bring. And Kevin's going to kill me because I bet you we did see this one come in on a ship, didn't we? But Port Canaveral is a very versatile port. And one of the cargo that it can bring to our port happens to be satellites. And then SpaceX has its own transporters that satellite can then be loaded onto and brought right into their payload processing facility. And that facility is located on the ITL Causeway, right near the launch pad.
There you go. Yep. So by air or by sea are the different ways to then get it to go by space.
I wouldn't recommend by truck, very much so, in the sense of wiggly wobbly. Believe it or not, ships are a lot more stable, and that plane is a nice airy ride. So those are the preferred methods.
There you go. Now this satellite, Alex, we talked a little bit about it. These are actually replacing other satellites that are up there, right?
Yeah, so I was saying there's these SpainSat satellites. There's one in particular, the original SpainSat, which was launched in March 2006. That's a long time ago. It's already very old. And in fact, this one in particular, the NG one, it's technically not replacing that one because it's going to be located at 30 degrees east, as you were mentioning, right? And the original SpainSat is at 30 degrees west. So I will imagine that probably is NG2. But there's another satellite that's going to be replaced as well, which is the XTAR-EUR, which was actually the first that was launched under the Hisdesat company, which is like sort of this private, public-private partnership, so to speak, between Spanish government and a bunch of other private companies as well. This is sort of as well one of the things that this mission, this satellite has as well. There's a bunch of companies partnering with the government and everything to be able to make this happen, and of course that's why it's a government satellite. But yeah, those two satellites, XTAR-EUR and the original SpainSat, those two are going to be replaced by these two new generation SpainSat satellites. And so, and one of the things, again, it's not just that it's newer, but it's also more capable with X-band communications, anti-jamming, and things like that. There's a lot of new technology here that will help, improve all of those communication systems. And I mentioned at first that it's military applications, but it also has civil applications as well. It's not just going to be, it's just going to be for that kind of stuff. No, it's also going to be as well for other types of civil applications. And so it's again one of these things where it's like it's a government trying to get their own independent communication system. And we already have that, but of course it's getting very old, and so what better way to get it renewed and getting more technology on it. And in the way of doing that, we also try to get that a bit more in-house, a bit more into our country as well.
Right. And interestingly, this one is adding a new feature. The other ones have the KU band and the X band. This one also has UHF, as you were mentioning earlier, the ultra high frequency. So that's new to this generation. But in terms of the anti-jamming, apparently they also have it where it can detect where a source of jamming is coming from and try and isolate that, both to possibly see who's behind it and to work around it. There are rumors that it's even able to withstand high atmosphere nuclear tests. That one, I don't know if it's totally true, but there are rumors that that is one of the capabilities of these new satellites as well. So, some cool stuff on here. Going back to the booster, I know we got to bring it up. This is an interesting question. I don't think we know the answer to it. James is wondering, do we have any insight into the selection process for which booster bites the dust on expendable missions? Julia?
Sawyer, I don't know if we have the exact answer, but I mean, I think it comes down to, well, first of all, age, right? We don't want to expend a booster that's only flown a couple times because we haven't gotten our value out of it, right? But I'm trying to remember if anyone does know this exact answer, chime in. But after a couple boosters were lost at sea, they did start putting in kind of an upgrade to the legs, a little bit more self-leveling, shall we say, before that octograbber can get underneath. So this may be one of the last boosters that didn't have that technology on board, which would make it, unfortunately, a good candidate for saying goodbye.
Yeah, the polite way of putting it, saying goodbye. Although I did appreciate, how do they pick which one bites the dust?
Well, this one will bite the dust, but it won't so much bite the dust as it will swim with the fishes.
Gonna be swimming with the fishes after this.
What's interesting is this is actually not the oldest booster that they have in the fleet, right? So you will think that maybe it will make more sense to get rid of the older one, but it's actually not. And we thought at first this was going to be flown on B1069, which is ironically also on a 21st flight, but it's older, right? And it also had some damage on its first flight after landing because of rough seas and everything. So it's quite interesting, right? That they chose B1073.
Now, if only we had some insight into what the qualification process was for refurbishment and reflight. But like you said, I mean, it could very much just be that maybe 1069 had a little bit more wear and tear on the joints. Maybe it would have needed engines switched out in order to achieve, the dynamics that you need for a launch of something this heavy. Maybe this booster's just fared a little bit better in the end, and they feel it can handle that long range yeet.
Or the opposite, that maybe it fared a little bit worse on a previous mission, and this one's technically showing more age than a slightly older by years one.
Good question, though.
Very good question. Yes, and unfortunately, the answer is SpaceX doesn't tell us. So it's going to have to be best guess there. The coefficient, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. And then Roseanne DeVasto with the question, who has the over the parking lot shot? We do. That is one of our remote cameras that we have at the Kennedy Space Center press site there. So yes, that is one of our remote cameras. Typically, we have it pointed at one of the pads or something a little more zoomed in. But for these launches, it's cool to kind of get a wide view of all of the people in the parking lot, all 6 of them. Well, we are now under 40 minutes to go until the scheduled liftoff of this mission. Alex, do you mind running us through kind of the timeline of what we can expect now in the next 39 minutes and 15 seconds here?
Yeah, so right now, if they're still on track for the opening of the window, remember this is a 2-hour window that opens at 8:34 p.m. Eastern. That will be 134 UTC on the 30th. And one of the things that usually happens around this time, if they're still tracking that, as I was saying, is they should be wrapping up the go-no-go poll for propellant load. And so around this time, that's when the launch director usually says whether they are go or not. If they are go, then they gave essentially the abort instructions and things like that. And then at T-minus 35 minutes, that's when propellant load starts. An automated sequence where RP1 and liquid oxygen begins loading on the first stage, and then on the second stage they only start loading RP1 first, and then about 15 minutes later the RP1 load on the second stage will wrap up, and they'll begin the chill down of the liquid oxygen line to the second stage ahead of that stage 2 liquid oxygen load start at T-minus 16 minutes. So that's more or less what we're looking forward to in the next few minutes. Of course, unfortunately, we don't have any access to those loops from mission control. And so we're going to have to wait until we see some confirmation from SpaceX, or we see some kind of activity from the booster, namely frost, which usually happens about 4 or 5 minutes into that propellant sequence. So about T-minus 31, 32 minutes, maybe T-minus 30, depending on the humidity and other weather conditions. But yeah.
A lot to keep an eye on in the next couple of minutes to see if they are underway. And again, once they start fueling, they are committed to that T0.
Yep.
Yeah. So in terms of everything proceeding, a lot of it comes down to the rocket. A lot of it, of course, also comes down to weather. Julia, how's the weather looking?
You know what, Sawyer? It is a gorgeous day. Our little polar vortex has pushed out, and that also means that we have almost no clouds in the sky. And when I say almost no clouds, I mean like I see 2 wispy, long somethings in the sky. Otherwise, the lagoon is calm, and the temperature is roughly 65 degrees, and it's gorgeous. So as far as weather goes, I don't see this at all having any constraints on this launch.
And neither does the 45th Weather Squadron, giving it a 95% chance of a go condition weather-wise for launch. At Games, I'll just say that, is asking, does SpaceX remove anything from the booster before an expendable launch? And the answer, Alex, is yes.
Yeah, they remove the landing legs, the grid fins, and it's not because, it's extra weight. It's just because they don't need it, right? If you're not going to land it, why would you keep the legs and the grid fins, right? In fact, what they do is the grid fins need to be, they are inserted into some of the hardware inside of the intrastage. So what they do is the access panels to be able to install those grid fins, they are covered. And so, if you were to look close to the intrastage, you will see that it's closed out. They also remove the RCS pods and things like that, like those thrusters that they have in the intrastage to be able to maneuver once it's in space and before it's through the atmosphere. And so those things get removed, and I will bet probably also the relight capabilities like the T-tip canisters and things like that probably get removed. Like if you don't need it, why would you have it, right? And why not? Maybe you can use it on another booster.
Yeah, exactly. They can mix and match parts between these boosters, right?
Yeah, and we've seen that not just visually, but also like from SpaceX. We've had confirmation in the past that even the engines, for example, get removed and then they fly on other booster for a bunch of other times. And so sometimes it's very likely that some of the engines might actually have more flights on them than the airframe itself, right, of the booster, which is quite funny.
Quite funny indeed. We are under that 35-minute mark now, so we'll be keeping an eye on the booster very closely to see if we can start seeing any of that frost forming. And if we do, we will indeed know that fueling is underway once that happens. Here's an interesting question from John Cook. They're saying, how many gallons of water does the water tower hold? You can see it to the left there of the fixed service structure, that black tower. There is the water tower, which during the space shuttle program was 300,000 gallons of water, if I recall correctly, which I believe is just over 1 million liters of water. Julia, that is quite a lot. What do they need all that water for anyway?
Oh, well, that water is kind of important to the protection of the launch pad itself, actually. Without that water, for sound suppression, SpaceX wouldn't be able to turn the pad around as fast as they do. That is the primary use for water, and also what kind of generates that steam plume that we see at launch.
Yes, we always look for the steam, which gives a good indication of engine ignition, and it drains that water very quickly. That thing can empty in about a minute. So that is the water tower, and sometimes we will actually see water leaking out of it as it kind of tops off, and that is totally normal. Let's take some more of your questions here. Reminder, if you have any questions, you can tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as we can. One of the things I want to talk about, Alex, is we've mentioned that, it has different bands on it and things like that. It has some cool deployment mechanisms for like the KU band antennas to be able to pop them out, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of these systems, of course, that need to be deployed while in orbit. One thing that I will mention, though, we now have confirmation from SpaceX that they are underway with that propellant load. And in fact, as I was saying this, I'm looking at the booster. I'm seeing some frost already building up on the booster liquid oxygen tank. But yeah, this is one of the things that they have included here, where there's a lot of these systems that are able to do, the X band, the ultra high frequency bands, and everything. It's really important to have that capability.
Yeah, and these will have. It's kind of like a little bed that folds out, and then they can take an individual KU band antenna and steer it in whatever direction they need. So it's kind of like a fold-out bed with different antennas you can point on it, which I think is just so cool.
Yeah, and the solar panels are huge. If I'm not mistaken, it's something like 40 meters or something like that in span from one tip to the other. Like, is a huge satellite once it's deployed out there in space. I'm kind of, I think if they wanted to like make it even more peak, they should have built one of these like giant expandable antennas like they do now. For some of these communications where the antenna expands to like 50 meters wide or 80 meters wide. It's crazy. Kind of wish they will have done that just to, maximize the potential. But hey, maybe NG3 or new generation or something.
new generation. I mean, these are supposed to last 15 years of operational lifetime.
Yeah.
So that may be a little bit.
Yep.
Coming up now on 30 minutes to go until launch of SpainSat NG I. We are getting closer. And I do want to thank RC Horseman really quickly here for gifting 10 Red Team memberships. Very much appreciate that. One question that I saw, a lot of people are wondering, will I be able to see the launch? Where can I see it? First off, here's a quick update on the timeline, by the way. As mentioned, we are now into that propellant load, SpaceX confirming that. So liquid oxygen and RP-1, rocket propellant 1, the refined form of kerosene, are being loaded into stage 1, and stage 2 getting that RP-1 load. That, of course, continuing till the famous T-minus 20-minute, 20-second vent, so we like to call it here, the LOX chill down in 9.5 minutes. So lots of good stuff still to come. But Julia, with this launch going due east, who should be on the lookout to potentially be able to see tonight's launch?
Well, Sawyer, I believe if you were to go outside during launch, you would see it as far south as you are. People would see it probably up in the Carolinas. Potentially Carolinas, for sure northern Florida. And if you're out in Orlando area right now on vacation, if you look east, you you too will see this rocket going out over the ocean.
There you go. Things to keep an eye out for. And again, this booster will not be returning. So this is an expended booster on its final flight here. But Space Marshal wondering, and we can say yes, do they recover the fairings? Alex, how does the fairing recovery process work?
That is a great question. So once the fairings separate about 3.5 minutes into flight or so, usually that's more or less the normal time. The fairings then have RCS thrusters that they can use to be able to orient themselves while in space, because it takes a while until they re-enter the Earth. And when they re-enter the Earth, they need to be in the right orientation, namely the curved part needs to face down, and so they use that sort of like a surfboard kind of thing to surf through the atmosphere as they re-enter through. And once they go through all of that, through that re-entry, they slow down, to subsonic speeds, and then they pop out a parachute, and then they splash down in the ocean. Out there in the Atlantic Ocean, it's going to be for this mission Bob, one of the 2 fairing recovery vessels that SpaceX uses in Florida to recover these fairings. And so in a couple of days, check out Space Coast Live, because you're going to see those fairings coming back home.
Yep, we have that 24/7 live feed, Space Coast Live, where you can see everything going on at KSC, parts of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and Port Canaveral, where boosters and fairings and all the different things come in. And there is a quick sneak peek at it at Space Coast Live. Well, live as you're seeing it. So that is always on. So make sure to check that out. And spoiler, there may or may not be a new camera that was installed at the port just today. So keep an eye out for the debut of Fleet Cam 2 now on SCL.
And you know what's funny about that, Sawyer, is Fleet Cam is the OG of our robot fleet. And all of these cameras went to Starbase, and our OG is finally getting a friend now.
Yes, that was our first major live feed, was the camera just looking at the fleet in Port Canaveral. So Fleet Cam 1. And yes, it finally has a friend. Bob Ross would be happy, because everyone needs a friend. Here's a question from Henry Slack. And Julia, I'm going to put this one to you. They're asking, why can't Falcon 9 hold like New Glenn can, and, well, did a lot? Do we still have you, Julia?
I totally and completely missed your question. Like, phone blacked out on me. Repeat the question for me, Sawyer.
Henry wanted to know, why can't Falcon 9 hold like New Glenn can, and, well, did a lot?
Well, that has to do with the fueling. Different fuels have different requirements, and SpaceX super chills their fuel. And with that super chill, it means you can't hold. You would have to totally detank and retank. And that's just the process that SpaceX chose to be able to do rapid fueling.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is cool to super chill propellants, but it is not super chill when it doesn't launch because of that.
Right. Now, if you want to say technically, SpaceX could push into a window if they haven't begun the fueling process. How about that?
There you go. I was just trying to make a terrible pun at the end there, that's all.
I tried to stop you.
You know that's not going to work. It's me. I'm being told we have a surprise per Kevin Michael Reed in the back channel. What is our surprise here? This, I believe, is our fancy schmancy tracking rig that we have now. And I believe we can see the back of the head of Gage, who is at the Cape. Spoiler! Yes, surprise, you're on air. Come say hi. There you go. Perfect. Gage coming in with the wave, listening in, and the thumbs up. Did good with the first launch. The first launch went off on time. And excited to see your tracking here. For those who don't know, Gage, one of the awesome operators over at Space Coast Live, who happens to be at the Cape now, will be doing the tracking in person as opposed to online. So everyone in chat, shout out to Gage. Cool little surprise. Alex, I did not jinx anything.
You totally did. You said that the first launch went well, and you just made the right conditions for the second one to not go well.
But that one already happened. It's not like I'm saying something will or won't happen in the future. I couldn't say that did happen. It is truth. It is fact. It is history.
Let's go at least 23 more minutes and see what happens.
Preferably 23 minutes and 40 seconds to getting past ignition and liftoff. That would be extra nice. Also extra nice is L, who says Sawyer and Alex best duo. Thank you, L. Now I gotta ask Alex. This may be a weird question, but given that this is a SpainSat, is there kind of a sense of pride with you or with the country in general of getting their own, getting a satellite like this up and running?
Well, the only pride that I have is that we chose the correct launcher. The last time that we had a very expensive satellite on a rocket, it was a Vega C, and it kind of, it was delivered not to the right orbit, not even into orbit, delivered to the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah.
So just the excitement that it's launching on a Falcon as opposed to, oh, cool, Spain getting into this more.
And it's not the first one, of course. We've had a few, especially smaller ones on transporter missions, but also big ones like the Hisdesat 30W6 mission, which ironically was also expendable. But also we had the PATH satellite that was also a military satellite launched on Falcon 9 from Vandenberg, and that one, if I'm mostly sure a lot of people in chat maybe remembers this, that one had 2 ride shares on board with that military satellite from Spain, and that was Tintin A and Tintin B from the Starlink prototypes. So yeah, that was a long time ago that happened, but it went into orbit. It was deployed. It did the thing, right?
It does the thing.
Yep, and it's actually it's actually part of the Hisdesat company as well. Like I talk about the XTAR-EUR satellite and the SpainSat satellite. The 2 original satellites are going to be replaced by SpainSat NG I and NG II. They also made the PATH satellite, and also the other one that I was mentioning that was lost on a Vega satellite, the COSat Ingenio satellite. And so, yeah, at least we chose the correct launcher, in my opinion. I'm mostly sure of its reliability.
Yeah, a lot of international satellite manufacturers have chosen Falcon 9 as one of their launch vehicles. And at least, I guess, it launches because they could have put it on an Ariane rocket, but that would maybe launch 6 years from now.
In fact, because it's now part of the news as well, I've seen like interviews with the CEO of Hisdesat saying like, yeah, we could have launched it on Ariane 6, but it's not launch enough. So it's like we want a launcher that has some past track, at least some heritage, I guess, some launches on its belt.
Yeah, you want something that's reliable, like the fact that it's pretty reliable that at T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, we get this that you see on your screen there, the T-minus 20-minute vent, aka the best vent. Julia, what is this vent?
This vent is, this is routine, as you can tell, Sawyer predicted it. But this vent is the topping off of the first stage fueling, and now we move into closing out second stage, which will be a vent that I'm sure Sawyer will be predicting not too far down the road.
Yeah, this one's actually the second stage. Yeah, this is the second stage RP1 wrapping up and purging the lines ahead of time. So they'll get those lines cleared out, get all of the RP1 out of there, and chill things down a little bit more. Because RP1 is a little bit closer to ambient temperature than the liquid oxygen is. It's still cold, but now it needs to get even colder. So here comes the dur in the colder. That should then begin with the stage 2 LOX load in a couple of minutes. And yes, we will have one more vent as they wrap up fuel load in both of the stages later on. So we will have to keep an eye on that. And as we keep an eye on this mission in particular, this is a Falcon 9 rocket at Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. On board is SpainSat NG I, or New Generation 1. This is a new type of military communications satellite that is primarily for Spain and other NATO members that will expand their coverage using X-band, Ku-band, and ultra-high frequencies all across North America, South America, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. As you can see, it is quite a big satellite. Alex, how heavy and big is this? And can you talk a little bit about the bus that it's built on?
Yeah, so the satellite, without all of the hardware deployed, is about 6.7 meters tall and 2.7 meters wide. And at launch, it's about 6,000 kilograms in mass. So it's quite a heavy satellite, and that's why the booster is going to be expanded on this mission. This is based on the EUR/STAR-EUR platform that Airbus builds, essentially, for some of these satellites. These big satellites are usually that EUR/STAR-EUR platform. And one of the things that it has is that it uses ion thrusters to be able to put itself into the final orbit, which means you have a higher a higher efficiency, right? And so you don't need as much fuel, and so that mass instead can go into payloads like what we were talking about, ultra high frequencies, X-band, K-band, Q-band, and so you have a lot more capability in a very similar size to a conventional satellite that may be using hypergolic propellants to be able to go into their orbits. But that also means it's going to take a while to get there, because ion thrusters, they are very slow, and it's a tiny amount of thrust, but a tiny amount of thrust over a long time, and it's a very high efficiency engine. It means you don't need as much fuel. It takes time, but again, if you're not in a hurry, you can kind of get there, and much more efficiently. In turn, you can carry more payload on your satellite.
Exactly, and this is there to help supplement and eventually replace the older batch of satellites that are up there. So this will be going to geostationary orbit, so it will stay stationary over a certain point on the Earth. This one will go into the 29 degrees east position, as it's known. There will be a second satellite, also set to launch this year, and that will go into the 30 degrees west position. That one will replace the original SpainSat, this one replacing a satellite called XTAR-EUR, EUR. So I'm guessing you're up there. Julia, this booster, I hate to keep bringing it up, but this booster is about to make its final flight, right?
Indeed, it is. It's a rare, for those who are just recently joining us, this is a rare expendable mission. This will be the 21st flight of booster 1073. So as you look in the sky and follow this launch, although it is a clear night, and often we would see that reentry burn as it comes toward the drone ship for landing, tonight we will not see that, sadly. Which means we are recovering part of this booster. Bob is downrange to recover the fairings, and as we discussed earlier, there are no landing legs, there are no grid fins, because they are not needed for this mission. So in theory, we can say a little bit of 1073 will live on.
Yes, and 1073, the rare, starting off its life with a Starlink launch, but also launching a whole bunch of international missions, including Hokuto R for Japan. You had Amazon's Nexus, which was for Hisdesat. So a lot of international missions carried on this particular.
Also Spanish.
Also Spanish. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that was a Spanish
Soraya
too.
GS. So a lot of cool international flights flown on Falcon here. But one final one, number 21. Speaking of numbers, this is SpaceX's 14th launch of the year, also the 14th of the month, given it's still January. The 77th Falcon launch since a previous failure, the 429th orbital flight in Falcon 9's history, and the 102nd SpaceX launch here from LC-39A at the Cape. So that's pretty cool. What's also pretty cool is being able to see the launch. Julia, what is the trajectory for this mission, and what about being able to see it?
Tonight's trajectory is due east. That means if you are anywhere north, south, or west of us, you should be able to see this rocket launch if you step outside and just simply look toward the east from where you are. If you're in the north, of course, you're going to look southeast. But hey, if you're on the coast, you're just going to look at the Space Coast across the lagoon and see that launch. And Sawyer, I want to tell you something. This photographer forgot something very essential. She forgot her SD card.
Oh no!
She had to run home. But you know what I learned on that little quick trip home? Because we're very fortunate to live where rockets launch. I learned that Titusville is very excited for this launch. The parks are absolutely jam-packed along the coast right now. This is a rare evening launch where people are still awake, right? And the weather suddenly kind of got nice around here again, much like those Florida brochures. With that being said, you may not see me if you're down the coast in Titusville because I'm somewhere else. But if you wanted to see how to watch a launch like the locals do, we have a video for that, y'all. And it's called How to Watch a Launch. And we can tell you where to go depending on what is launching and where it's launching from. And I invite you to join us out here for a launch someday.
Absolutely. And I think the video is great because it goes over all the different locations for each launch pad. So if you want to specifically see one for 39A or 40 or 41, all the different views, all of us at the Cape worked together to put together a comprehensive list of, hey, here's all the places we've been, here's where we recommend, and here's what it'll look like for you. So you can go ahead and check that out on our channel called See a Rocket Launch in Person. And a reminder, if you have any questions of any kind for us, you can tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can as we continue into the countdown now. 11 minutes and 45 seconds to go until the scheduled launch here of B-1073 and SpainSat NG I. Let's see what other questions we have here in the meantime. I had a bunch of questions, Alex, asking about, do we know how many more boosters they will plan to expend and how many new boosters they plan to add to the fleet, given that this one's expended and there's probably a chance that NG2 will have to have that booster expended?
Well, unfortunately, we cannot predict how many expendable boosters there's going to be in the future because it's subject to these sort of missions, right? That they need this kind of performance and things like that. However, we do know that there are new boosters coming up on the future. We've had recently at McGregor a new booster having been tested, and it's already off of the stand. But there's a new one as well, like almost a few days after it was put out of the stand. A new one has been put on the stand. It's a different one. We know that because it looks different. It doesn't have the same number of logos or and things like that. So there are at least 2 new boosters that are joining the fleet very soon. And so there's no worry here about the lack of boosters or anything. There's actually some of the boosters out there in the fleet that have not flown for like a month and a half. Some others have not flown for like 2 months. We're sort of like wondering what's going on, right? And meanwhile, there are other boosters that are being turned around in like 20 days, which is on the faster end of the spectrum of booster turnarounds. So yeah, there's nothing to worry about there. Of course, there's going to be more expendable missions in the future, but it's very hard to forecast that because of it's up to the schedule and the customers and the satellite that they need to launch.
Exactly. And Julia, when they do expend these, Jesme is wondering, do they use the flight termination system or just let it fall naturally? What do we know?
I honestly don't think SpaceX has said, but I'm pretty certain it has a hazard zone defined for it, and it's going to fall in basically a graveyard in the ocean, and it will self-destruct. The velocity that it's going to come down at is terminal, and it'll break up. It'll become, I don't know, a deep sea reef of sorts.
Yeah, anything that remains will become an artificial reef in the ocean. So it seems like it's polluting, but in the end, in this case, it's really not. And it depends on what's also able to survive re-entry too. Speaking of graveyards, and Roseanne DeVasto was wondering, I mentioned that it will replace the other satellites. Alex, replace implies an existing satellite is being decommissioned. Is that true?
Yeah, so those satellites will move into a graveyard orbit. Usually in geostationary orbit, that means it's an orbit around 300 kilometers above the geostationary belt. That's enough distance to have a good separation with the operational satellites. And so they're gonna use those remaining last few moments of those satellites essentially to be able to go into that into that graveyard.
Yeah, and the two satellites that are set to be replaced, which one will this particular mission be replacing?
Well, if this is going to 30 east, and of the two, so we talked about the XTAR-EUR and the original SpainSat satellite. The SpainSat satellite, it's at 30 degrees west over that area, and then the other one is over 29 degrees east. So of course, if this is going to 30 degrees east, it's probably going to be replacing XTAR-EUR just because that's the one that is in that location. And so, and then the other one, the NG2 SpainSat, that's going to be replacing the original SpainSat satellite. But that launch is not going to happen until later in the year.
Exactly. And this
Also
one,
on Falcon 9.
yeah, and this one is going to 29 degrees east, so the exact same orbit as XTAR. So there we go.
Yep.
So yes, that will be replacing it, and these have an expected lifespan of about 15 years in orbit. Also, I do want to thank Earl for becoming a PadRat member. Thank you for all of the support. As we continue to get closer to launch, things are getting a lot more exciting, and I would say they're not very chill, but there is a chill down happening right now, Alex, right?
Yeah, T-minus 7 minutes, they start the engine chill on the 9 Merlin engines on the first stage. And what they do is they flow a little bit of that liquid oxygen that's going to eventually flow through the engine. But when that happens at engine ignition, it's like really high flow because you need to feed those engines. They're very hungry, right? But at this point in time, what they do is they open the pre-valves, those valves that essentially let that liquid oxygen into the engine. And instead of running the pumps, what that means is they flow at very low pressures, low rates. And so that allows them to be able to condition those pumps on those 9 Merlin engines. It's sort of like the difference between, running your tap on your faucet all the way to the end, right? And like completely letting all of the flow of water versus just opening it a little bit and let it trickle those droplets of water, so to speak, right? It's very similar to that. If you just do those droplets, it's a lot easier to control and manage that conditioning, that cooling down. If you instead have it flowing at very high flow and high pressures and whatnot, then that essentially shocks thermally the material. And that is not good for your engines because those things need to be running for 2.5 minutes, and then for this mission, not on the way back down, but on a reusable mission, they have to also work on the way back down. On the MVAC engine also happens as well, and they need to run again after they go into orbit because they need to burn another minute, around 26 minutes into flight. So yeah.
Julia, can we get a final weather check from you before we let you go set up for taking shots of the launch?
Final weather check is unchanged. It is a gorgeous night here with still waters and beautiful starlit skies. So I think we're ready to go.
Well, best of luck to you, Julia, on getting your photos out there. Excited to see it and talk to you after launch.
See you on the other side, Sawyer.
We are coming up now on 4.5 minutes till the launch of SpainSat NG I. Again, this is a communication satellite made by Spain in partnership with Airbus, Tasmania, ESA, all to help with communications in both the KU band, X band, and ultra high frequencies. These will typically military communications, expanding and covering about 2/3 of the globe in a way that is meant to be high speed and secure, including ways to check for any interference from, shall we say, ne'er-do-wells. At this point now, the strong back should be retracting there. You can kind of see it is indeed backwards a little bit. That tall white structure up against the rocket, back just 1.2 degrees. Alex, why do they need to do that?
Well, as you can see, there's a clamp there that needs to open, right? And that small retraction kind of lets them be able to have a bit of a clearance and sets up the retraction for later in the liftoff process. At liftoff, it's going to throw back all the way out. And one of the things that, why they do this just at 1.2 degrees is so that the umbilicals between the transport director and the rocket are as short as possible. Because if they are short, that means they don't get as much damage on a launch.
Yeah, especially with the rate at which they try and turn around these launch pads, that is extremely important.
Yep.
3 minutes to go now until launch. You could also kind of see from this angle the different umbilicals, the lines that you're mentioning there. Those are what carry not only propellants to the vehicle, but also data to and from the vehicle, as well as the conditioning needed for the spacecraft inside those fairing halves. So basically, air conditioning in Florida, for lack of a better way to describe it.
Yep.
We're also coming up now on the wrapping up of propellants. Next should be the completion of fuel load into the first stage, followed about a minute later by load into the second stage. You can see we have our long-range trackers there and ready to go. We will hopefully be able to use that along with Gauge there to track it to get some stunning views for you of tonight's launch of SpainSat NG I aboard the rare expendable Falcon 9 mission. Again, this booster on its final flight, not to be flown again, unfortunately. What can we expect, Alex, in the next 2 minutes of the countdown here? Besides crickets.
Sorry, talking while muted. Yeah, so we're going to have the wrap up of the liquid oxygen load on the second stage, and that's actually a sign of that. You can see that vent from the Stromback coming out. That is the clearing of the lines in preparation for liftoff, because now Falcon 9 is fully loaded with propellants ahead of that flight, and so they need to clear out all of that in preparation for the liftoff. In 30 seconds, the ground computers will hand over control of the countdown to the onboard computers on Falcon 9. That's when we're going to have Falcon 9 in startup, and about 20 seconds later, hopefully, we're also going to get that go for launch from the launch director.
There you go. And again, that vent that you see is just purging the remaining liquid oxygen out of the lines that was used to fill the second stage of the booster, because you do not want super cooled liquid oxygen right around super hot engines as it goes by for risk of potential bad day, shall we say. Now, under 1 minute to go, the tanks are pressurizing to flight levels, and as Alex just mentioned, Falcon 9 should now be in startup, with the onboard computers taking control of the remainder of the countdown. And the next thing we will listen for now, as we hit the T-minus 45 second mark, is confirmation that they are go for launch. That is what we are waiting for now. We should have that any moment. 30
and they are
seconds.
go for launch.
That's what we want to hear. Go for launch. We are now 25 seconds away. I promise we will stop talking once it lifts off, and it will take a couple of seconds for the sound to hit our microphones a few miles away, but we will let you enjoy the beautiful launch sounds in just about 10 seconds from now. You can now see the rainbirds, that water suppression at the base of the rocket starting up. Next, we'll keep an eye out for ignition of those 9 Merlin 1D engines. We have ignition and liftoff of SpainSat NG I, a new generation for Spain to space. And it has cleared the tower. an absolutely beautiful vapor cone just before hitting max Q. Falcon 9 going through the maximum aerodynamic pressure it will face during that launch portion. Oh my gosh, that was absolutely stunning to see that vapor cone. We are now 1 minute 45 seconds into flight. Next up
Really
will be
clear skies today.
beyond clear and stunning. You can see that plume expansion as it gets to the thinner parts of the atmosphere and the amazing colors from it.
Amazing
Next up,
21st and last flight for the booster.
what a send-off for it, too. Stunning. Next up, 3 events in rapid succession, starting with MECO, main engine cutoff, when those 9 Merlin engines shut down, followed by stage separation of the first and second stage, and then second engine start 1 when they ignite the Merlin vacuum engine. We're about 20 seconds away from that. Gorgeous blue color, too. I mean, shout out to the team at the Cape for spectacular sound and continued great tracking work here. Any second, we should see main engine cutoff.
There it is.
That is MECO. Next up will be first and second stage separation. And keep an eye out there. That looks like ignition of the Merlin vacuum upper stage engine. So we have SES-1. Exactly what we want to see. And with that, we say farewell on this booster's 21st and final flight. It served its job very well. And this is the slight delay replay from SpaceX's feed there. And that is engine ignition on that second stage. That is what we love to see. And I see all the 07s, the 07 salutes in chat for the Valiant Booster 1073-21. Look at that. The plume expansion on that second stage. Unbelievable.
There's fairing separation. Look at that. Did you see that?
Yeah, you could actually see it in the plume.
Wow.
So yes, those are those 2 fairing halves that protect the payloads during the actual launch process. Once you get into space and they're no longer needed, just like you see there in the replay, they are jettisoned. And these have been reflown, right, Alex?
Come again?
These have been reflown, those fairing halves, correct?
Yes, one has flown for... so they are flying for an 8th time and a 5th time on these 2 fairing halves.
And there is a boat downrange to actually pick them up, to scoop them up and fly them another time, and that would be Bob.
Yep.
That, by the way, still continuing to track from the ground. That is Gage, who you saw just a couple of minutes before launch there waving, continuing to track this flight. Absolutely beautiful. That is what it looks like from the tracker's perspective, by the way, of trying to keep that in frame, the joystick there. Amazing work.
Definitely better than with a trackpad.
Yeah, that is true. That's how he normally does it, is with like a laptop trackpad. That is impressive. So normally at this point, we'd be saying, oh, what's happening with the first stage and all of that? What is the burn time for the second stage, though?
Well, the second stage is going to be burning until about T plus 8 minutes. And then we're going to have another burn at T plus 26 minutes, which it's going to last about 1 minute or so to put the satellite into that geostationary transfer orbit. But unfortunately, the first stage should be coming back down right now and about to burn up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's also very strange from a commentator's perspective, because at this point, normally I'm looking at my timeline of, all right, when is the entry burn, when's the landing burn, confirming all of that, and we have none of that.
Yeah.
Tell me that's not strange, Alex. It feels weird, doesn't it?
It does. And like, right now we will be preparing for the entry burn. It will be with a, fighting fire with fire and whatnot. But right now, I think the atmospheric fire will win this time around. Yeah, it's not going to be fire against fire. It's just fire.
Yeah. Fighting fire with the giant, crazy entry forces of atmosphere against metal. yeah, we know who wins that one.
Yeah.
6.5 minutes into flight. It's also cool because normally we don't get to focus on the second stage here with the full-sized, I'm happy to say, Merlin vacuum engine.
Yeah, that's the great thing of these missions, that you don't get the stubby nozzle.
For those who don't know, SpaceX has two different types of nozzles. There is the full-length one that you see here, and a much shorter length one, which we here at NSF have nicknamed the stubby nozzle, which is able to, again, get payloads into space, but it doesn't have as much oomph, shall we say, behind it. It doesn't have as much delta V that it can use. So for payloads that are lighter, they can use the stubby nozzle. They cannot for a crazy heavy payload like this. So we see the full-sized nozzle.
Still tracking that second stage.
We're about 40 seconds away now from the
And-
scheduled engine shutdown.
It went away.
Still not bad. And again, a reminder, the SpaceX feed is on a slight delay compared to ours, hence why the clocks do look a little different, why there is that slight delay on it.
And you might notice that it's going to be shutting down at T plus 8 minutes, when usually on a Starlink launch, it is 8.5 or even close to 9 minutes. And that is precisely what's going on here. Instead of burning for all that time, there's a little bit reserved there, and that's what they're going to be using for that second burn, that minute long burn, in about 20 minutes from now.
And we should be coming up on SECO, second engine cutoff 1. So keep an eye there now. 164 kilometers in altitude, with shut off any second now at over 27,000 kilometers
And there it
an
is.
hour. Beautiful. You can still see the red hot glow of the metal. What is the metal that's made of, Alex?
That's niobium. At least an alloy of niobium.
Still glowing red hot. 27, look at that, 27272 kilometers an hour. 164 kilometers in altitude. And
that's the speed for a parking orbit in low Earth orbit, and then you have another burn to get into that geosynchronous transfer orbit.
yeah. And again, that will coast for a bit. We will work on pulling replays of the launch in the meantime as we continue to wait for satellite deploy, which is supposed to happen a little over 31 minutes into flight. So not that long from now, a little over 20 minutes from now is satellite deploy. Julia, do we have you back on comms?
Hello, Sawyer. Yes, I am back.
How was that one?
That was pretty. I enjoyed that, thoroughly enjoyed that, actually. And I'm going to edit a photo to share because I got one of those too. But it was a gorgeous launch. The sky lit up kind of like our midnight sun rising and reflecting off of the lagoon. So I'd say that's a beauty.
Yeah, obviously you didn't get to see an entry burn.
Well, no, but like Gage saw it going downrange, it was that clear of a night, and sounds like Gage had it tracked way far downrange for the second stage.
Yeah, pretty much almost all the way to Miko, or to SECO, excuse me. Definitely had to
Wow.
Miko. Very well done, Gage and Cape Team. I know we've got some awesome photos. I've already seen the preview of at least one of them in the back channel. Exciting stuff to come. And of course, the launch replays to come, including that tracker view. So lots to stay with here as we wait the next couple minutes here for one final engine burn and then the deployment of SpainSat NG I. I also see all the 07 spam, Flipper79, by the way, with the super chat saying the 07 spam as we say farewell 1073. Let's see, a bunch of people saying fighting fire with aluminum. Aluminum loses. Yeah, Alan, I think that's very true. Nesbitt saying they could see stage 2 all the way from Bermuda. That is pretty cool. And
Yeah.
Pizza Lore is wondering, by the way, why did they expend the first stage on this one, for those who don't know?
They needed the performance for this because it's a 6-ton payload. And, for that kind of mass, the satellite will not go into a traditional geosynchronous transfer orbit. And so they need that extra performance. When they have to land the booster, they need to reserve some of that propellant. And so they just shut down the engines earlier than it would for a complete burn. And so that's why they need that extra performance. That reserve propellant needs to be burned in order to get that extra push to get the satellite into that orbit.
Yes. Also, a certain person in chat named EJ_SA is saying, so we can blame Alex for booster 1073 getting expended?
Ah, hey, don't blame me.
That's mean. Funny, but mean.
It is
Here's-
true though that there's a history with these boosters, and also because the path the satellite launched with the path satellite that I mentioned before with Tintin A and Tintin B, the booster was also expended. There was also another, but that was with Hisdesat, not Hisdesat. But still a Spanish satellite, which was Hisdesat 30W6. It was a Block 4 booster. It was new, and it was expended because of bad weather.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Not necessarily intentionally expended.
yeah, it was supposed to be recovered, but they were not able to do that, so it was expended.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, stage 1, whatever didn't burn up will now end up at the bottom of the ocean, and we say farewell to that booster. Which, as they continue this, I know we were talking about this earlier of, they lean back, the strong back 1.8 degrees, and then throw it back to try and save it to be able to reuse these things a bit quicker.
Hmm.
Crowdsurfer is wondering, Alex, what changes have been made to make pad turnaround times so much quicker?
Ooh, well, one of the few things that at least I can imagine might be happening is reinforcements everywhere. Like, being able to know, like, launching a lot lets you know where things wear out more every launch, where things get more damage, and things like that. And so you can get ahead of that and protect them, right? Being able to spray the water maybe a second earlier or a second later to optimize the way that they are protected during a launch environment. And so those kinds of things, and also streamlining the way that the refurbishment process goes. Because if you just sit around and do inspections and things like that, and it takes 3 days just for the inspection and then another week for refurbishment, then of course the launchpad is not going to be turned around quicker, right? You need to find optimizations there on those processes, running things in parallel, for example, instead of doing one and then going to the next. So of course, that's part of the process, and we're going to see that as well with Starship, and we're seeing that already with Pad A. Pad B is designed differently, and so is with with the Falcon 9 launch pads.
Yeah, and I mean, it's crazy at 40 they've been able to get the turnaround down to it feels like an average of 3 to 4 days, and 4 days seems like a long time.
Yeah.
But 39A still kind of tends to be the trouble child of the two, right? Where that one tends to last closer to what?
5-6 days. Yeah, today was 8 days and 20 hours of turnaround time, but still that's quite nice. Like there's not a lot of other launch pads out there that can say they're being turned around in 8 days, like in a regular sense, right? Not like a one-off kind of thing. Because of course there are, like, old Soviet launch pads that were turned around in 24 hours, but it's like, yeah, but that was one time or maybe 2 times. This is happening dozens of times each year.
It's impressive, just as impressive as these launch replays are with our remote cameras that we have there at the KSC press site. We talked about it. I mean, Julia, these replays are the perfect definition of turning night into day. It's hard to describe, right?
Yeah, it's hard to describe. And for me, night launches are special because the very first launch I ever saw when I moved here in 2016 was a night launch. So, I mean, I kind of favorite them, unless they're in the middle of the night when I should be sleeping. But yeah, it's hard to describe unless you've been here for it. But the foreground in front of you, I don't know. It's even more so than the moon lighting up the sky.
Oh yeah, the moonlight feels like someone turned a night light on in a room as opposed to like turning the actual light on above you. And I agree. I am a sucker for night launches because yes, my first one was also a night launch, STS-130. But then something about streak shots too. I don't know what it is, Julie. I don't know if you agree. There's something about seeing a streak shot showing the path of the launch that you can only get at night that really speaks to me.
Exactly. They're not as sexy as an engine shot, right? But they do tell a unique story. It can be a story about the launch itself or a story about the area where you are, and the place that we live. So, hey, if you see a streak shot on our shop.nasaspaceflight.com, those tell a great story and look great on your wall too.
Yes. By the way, you can kind of see some of the fish jumping in the water there. When it was super bright like that, you can actually see little blips in the water. Those are the fish jumping from the vibrations. It's one of the
I
coolest
can
things.
certify dogs bark, fish jump, birds fly away, and occasionally, depending on where you are, the gators will make noises at you. Do not be where the gators are during a launch, okay?
And what kind of noise do humans do when Falcon 9 launches?
Ooh,
That's a very strange
pretty.
animal, right?
Yeah, we are kind of strange. Although I can say the noise we make is usually one we're making as our phone is up to the launch. So if you ever do come to experience a launch, do me a favor, put your phone down and just enjoy it.
Yes, absolutely. That is the biggest recommendation. I was given that on my first launch. One of the guys who worked at the had White Room as the closeout crew was talking to him about it, and his one piece of advice was for your first launches, don't worry about photos. It's like there are people out there whose job it is professionally to take such good photos that are better than anything you'll take on your first try. So just be there, enjoy it, soak it all up. And I agreed with that 1,000,000%. I'm glad I did. And yet here I am now with Julia, Max, and Dee, and everyone out there being those people that gets those professional photographs now. It's a weird turn of events, but even then, I still try when I'm taking photos to look over the camera real quick just to take in the reality of what's happening versus just the lens and the screen. Awesome. Great replays here. Again, you can see the team doing the tracking at the bottom there. You got Gage with the support of DOS watching everything going on there. I love you can see the two of them. And like we were just talking about, soaking it in reality. You can see DOS leaning back there, taking it looks like a cell phone shot, actually. Right through Max Q there in the vapor cone. That vapor cone was also really cool to see. By the way, for those just joining, we are about 10 minutes away from the reignition of that second stage engine, the Merlin vacuum, for about 1 minute before deployment of the SpainSat NG I satellite. But yeah, this is an ultra wide shot from the fantastic DYs. Oh, I could just stare at these for hours. It's hard when you're a commentator because you're supposed to be talking over it. But what do you say, Alex? What do you say?
I don't know. It's a lot of things right now. Oh, look at that. Behind the scenes.
So if you look, you can actually see the rocket on the screen there. So if you want to see what the track looks like behind the scenes, you can see Gage doing the physical tracking, but keep an eye on that little monitor there for the actual liftoff. And I did see Gage take a quick sneak peek at the actual launch itself. You see every now and then the look over. I do something similar, except I look over my camera instead of to the side of just, you got to keep following it. You go where you think it's going, but you look away for half a second so you can actually go, okay, that is a real rocket in front of me. But yes, everyone in chat, shout out to Gage Rough Riders Show for a spectacular tracking job with this awesome rig here. And here is the beautiful close-up replay of the launch, in fact. So we've gotten the behind the scenes. Now we've got the real thing. Love seeing the ice falling off of it. So just the way the light is hitting tonight. Get that cool glowing expansion. The best, keep an eye out for that vapor cone. So that was about, what, a minute, 15 seconds into flight? Which, for those who don't know, Alex, what is a vapor cone?
Well, you have the rocket going a lot of, through the atmosphere at very high speeds, and so the condensation on the air just essentially, goes from gas to a to very little liquid droplets, and so it's a very sudden thing, and there you can see that transition happening. I don't know what other kind of analogy I could make of this, but essentially it's this transition that happens, and you can see the contrail as well. The exhaust plume kind of makes a very similar thing where it interacts with the gaseous water in the atmosphere and condenses it, and so it produces that plume. And as it goes further up, the water it stops being there in the atmosphere because it's going very, very high up, and that's why it disappears, as it just did a few minutes ago.
That perfect transition. Oh, I mean, you gotta love it. It's the atmospheric conditions have to be just right to be able to see it super clearly. It can happen sometimes where it'll be a much smaller one, but to get that brilliant of a poof, I guess, is just stunning. And again, shout out to Gage for an awesome job with this track. Continuing all the way through main engine cutoff, by the way, Miko. We were able to see that. We were able to see fairings fall away from it. So, gorgeous colors, too. While we continue to watch the replay on the left, Alex, what's happening with the Berlin vacuum engine on the right as we hit Miko on the replay?
Yeah, right now it is getting chilled down, sort of like, the same thing as when it is about to light up for the first time, but this time is for a second time, and so that you can see there that venting coming out from the what's it called, the bleed line, essentially, and so that line releases that gaseous oxygen that's coming off from that chill down process. And one of the other things that's happening at the same time is some of the thrusters on the RCS system, on the reaction control system of the second stage, are firing to be able to settle down those propellants. Remember, this is in 0G or microgravity conditions. So the propellants are currently, floating around on the tank, and you don't want that when you are about to let up the engine. So they fire those settling thrusters on the second stage to be able to get those propellants on the bottom of the tank. One of the things that I love, though, is once we see that relight of the MVAC engine, watch out for that bit of solid oxygen that's it's forming there, and it's gonna fly off and get burned by the exhaust of the engine, which I always find hilarious and very interesting to see. But yeah.
Yeah, we saw one little bit of ice chunk fall away there already. And what is that snow, by the way?
Yeah, that's this gaseous oxygen. It gets released. It cools down, and since it's in a vacuum, it doesn't go into liquid. It just goes straight to ice. So there you can see, bye, solid oxygen. If it weren't so cold, I would love to play with some solid oxygen. But yeah.
Yeah, don't lick that. That's a little too cold.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then what looks like tinfoil bag, that big Mylar thing, what does that do?
That is a thermal protection cover, essentially, of the. It covers all of the turbo machinery, like the turbo pump, the gas generator, all of these very critical systems that need to be protected from the thermal conditions of space and things like that.
There we go. Absolutely stunning to watch. Also stunning, we have the photos from our field team coming up. We have a very special treat. There's 2 photos that are absolutely stunning, including one that is so good that it's already a metal print.
Ooh.
Shop.nasaspaceflight.com. So stick around as we have the relight there of the Merlin vacuum engine as well.
And we saw that ice falling off and getting roasted by the MVAC engine exhaust.
Yeah.
And look at the speed just, climbing up, going, I believe it needs to go up until 33,000 to 35,000
kilometers an hour, which is still
Yep.
mind-blowingly fast.
Really fast.
And already 410 kilometers in altitude and climbing too. Which, it's, 35,000-ish kilometers to get to actual real geostationary orbit?
Yeah, it's a long way out there.
Yeah.
Should be coming up on that shutdown soon.
And we'll stand by for SECO 2, second engine cutoff 2. And there we
There
go.
you go.
Again, the residual heat keeping the engine glowing red. But that should be the final burn ahead of satellite deployment in about 3 minutes from now. Absolutely beautiful. Again, stay tuned. We have that photo coming. We've got a couple awesome photos to show. Like I mentioned, one of them is already a metal print. You are not going to want to miss it. So hang tight to be able to see that along with the SpainSat NG I payload jettison / separation. What's going to happen to the second stage, by the way, Alex?
Well, the second stage will remain in this sort of kind of orbit. It's not so once the satellite deploys, it'll passivate itself, essentially venting off all of the remaining propellant and draining its batteries. But other than that, it's not going to do any more engine burns. It's just going to stay in this orbit. Eventually, because the lowest point of this orbit is very close to the atmosphere, it'll be brought back down, but uncontrolled, and pretty much like you will not be able to really tell far in advance where it'll fall. But,
But yeah, likely not overpopulated areas is the
exactly.
main thing. But one thing that is popular, at least, are the streak shots like we were just talking about. Julia, awesome work with this one. I love the marine contradiction with it, considering there were no marine assets to recover the booster.
Well, true, but it's an ode to the Atlantic, or the ocean, shall we say, that this booster is landing in.
Amazing work, by the way, as always. I love your shots, Julia.
Thank you, Sawyer.
And we have another fantastic shot. This one from Max Evans out in the field. Again, pretty appropriate with the communications satellite on its way to have a communications satellite in view as well over at the Kennedy Space Center. And if you want to view this on your wall, you can. It is now available as a metal print at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. You can see the title there, Into the Drink. You can even see the vapor cone, where the vapor cone started if you go back up along the streak. Right there. You can see it in the streak itself, which is pretty darn cool as well. So definitely worth checking out. It's available as a metal print as well as a poster. Great job as well, Max. And you can also see there 39A, the transporter erector already vertical again. And we are now just seconds away from the deployment of SpainSat NG I. You're talking about before, Alex, this is a big boy satellite we're talking here.
Yeah, again, this is 6.7 meters tall, 2.7 meters wide, 6 tons in mass. Quite a big boy, yeah.
And in just a couple of seconds, it will be deployed into its preliminary geostationary transfer orbit, where it will then slowly work its way into its final geostationary orbit, 29 degrees east location. And here we go.
There it is.
Beautiful. That is indeed separation of SpainSat. That marks a successful mission for Falcon 9.
You can also see the ion engines that it's going to be using for that orbit racing. It's going to take a while, but once it's out there, it's going to be getting into operational service and be of service for the Spanish armed forces and also for a lot of the NATO allies and similar countries as well.
Here we go. I do want to thank some people for their support throughout the stream today. Shano, thank you for becoming a Padrat member. And Lords of Random saying that ice gave me 9-3 flashbacks. I mean, at least it's normal this time. It's not leaking out when it's not supposed to. So that's a positive.
Yeah, the venting is completely normal. That is totally what we should expect. Ooh, more replays.
Yes, this looks like another replay from one of our Cape cams, giving that cool side-on view. Again, it's just how bright it really is. So, absolutely stunning. I want to thank the amazing people that helped make this gorgeous stream, including these replays, happen tonight. Of course, we will end things off as we traditionally do with a DUI's slow motion outro. So stay through to get to see the cool slow-mo shots. But first, Julia, thank you for joining us from the field.
Happy to be here. Another launch down. Many more to go.
Absolutely. Alex, from Spain, as we see SpainSat launch to space. Thank you for joining.
It's a pleasure as always. And, more launches coming up soon with RTLS very, very shortly.
That's going to be the exciting part. We also had out in the field D-Wise, helping to provide us some awesome video. Again, you'll see that slow motion replay. And we also had Max Evans out in the field with that gorgeous print now available in the shop. We had Gage out there on the tracker, doing a fantastic job once again, getting those awesome downrange views for us. And we had Kevin Michael Reed behind the scenes, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, and bringing these views to you. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host for today's launch coverage. Thank you so much for joining us here at NSF. You'll be able to see all photos and videos and cool things that happen during these launches by checking out all of the social channels. We're on X, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky now, you name it, we're there. So you can keep up to date on everything going on in spaceflight. There are some of those socials right there on your screen as we speak. I will let you enjoy the beautiful slow motion replay from D-Wise as we say, see you next time.
and here we go.
We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up.
Payload down to nominal.
Fighting downside ST-UTC. ST-UTC. It's orange! Oh my god! Oh my god! Decollage! Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
If the methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?